Welcome everyone to the InsurTech NY webinar entitled "Is AI the New Internet?" We're glad to be welcoming our partner for this webinar, Indem, and I'll talk about our featured speakers in a couple minutes, but over the next 30 minutes, you're going to have the opportunity to really learn about how businesses are looking at using AI and referring it back to previous points in history, and really answering the question, is AI the new internet for business? For those of you who are not familiar with InsurTech NY, we run a number of different programs for startups, including competitions, a accelerator program to match carriers and startups, a lab. We have educational and networking events, and we also have a seed stage fund. This is an example of our calendar for next year. So for those of you who are not already registered, we have great events that are up on our website, and we run executive roundtables, early stage competition, the match program, and the MGA lab. And most notably, I believe Kyle will be there for sure, and potentially Russ as well. But we have our spring conference on April 2nd and 3rd. Next year, we'll have 1,000 people there. So look forward to seeing you in person. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our two speakers. Kyle, who's the founder of Indem. They're past alumni of our InsurTech Match program. They're really pioneers in creating technology to communicate with customers using AI. And they're one of the few that actually eats their own dog food. So not only have they built solutions for businesses, whether it be brokers or MGAs or carriers to use, but they actually have used it themselves to sell digitally a product online, which Kyle might share more about. And then I'd also like to invite Russ Finley from HIG Capital. Russ has made some of his own history, notably leading marketing at Hiscox when they launched the first commercial insurance product online. He's had the opportunity to spend time not just in insurance, but also in other industries like consumer products. He is a operating partner at HIG, so he knows how to use operational and other types of leverage like AI to scale companies. So he's going to be sharing some insights. Also of note, Kyle is an amateur historian, so hopefully that will come out in the presentation. Now I will pass it off to them.
Thanks, David. Amateur historian is probably an overstatement, but appreciate it. So thanks everybody for joining. As David said, we got an early start at Indem on generative AI, and now that it's become something that everyone is talking about, I've got conversations all day long with people at different parts of the journey, whether they're interacting with it every day or just a few times a week or just getting comfortable with it. And I'm really excited to share this time with Russ. I do think that one really strong metaphor for what we can expect from generative AI is to picture this as a platform technology, and the internet is one we all know very well, Russ more than anybody. And I've got my own experience in insurance, kind of working through the evolution of the internet. So my first job in insurance was filing surplus lines taxes for my father. That was the early 2000s. And at that point, every excess and surplus state-based website was kind of its own unique animal. And so a young kid that's on the internet all the time knew how to use it. And then I went on to be an agent, and I worked at another InsurTech where we built API-based, web form-based small business products, and one of them was Hiscox. And so one of the things that I think is interesting is the level of product availability online, and really the vast majority right now is still only available to agents, right? So for rating products, and I think it's just one value chain activity that's interesting to talk about. So I'll stop there. Russ, interested in how you'd like to start this off, and if you've got any thoughts to kick us off as well.
No, I mean, well, firstly, thank you very much for having me on. It's a real pleasure and an honor, and I really very much enjoyed my time in being directly involved in the insurance industry. I actually didn't start the direct to consumer or direct to small business that happened a few years before I joined, back in England, and they brought that technology and a couple of people to the U.S. My job was to help significantly scale it, which thankfully and fortunately we were able to do. And we were already, starting to dabble in AI, then on the marketing side of things, and I've gotten involved in lots and lots more AI stuff since then. So I'm really eager to dig in and talk about AI and insurance.
Awesome. And to all the attendees, please do ask questions. It'd be great if this were an interactive session today. And so, Russ, I wonder if in 1999, you might tell us what you would have done differently if you knew how important the internet is now, or if you already felt that way. And you were already
Yeah, yeah. Well, two things. One, I probably would have invested all my money, taken a second mortgage on my house, and put it in a couple of notable stocks that anybody could probably have guessed would be a winner. So which I didn't do. And then two, I probably would have gone to work for one of those companies in marketing or something like that. I remember in like the 96 or 7, I was Unilever's global expert in e-commerce at the time, and trying to figure out if the internet was actually commercially viable, which seems laughable now, but back then it was kind of a question mark. And a couple of sales reps for a company selling advertising were saying, "Hey, we're quitting. We're going to go to work for this company called Yahoo. You should totally do it. It's going to be a big thing." And I'm like, "Ah, you're nuts." So clearly, I missed the boat on a couple of those things, but that's those two things from a professional perspective I would do very differently. And in '99 was also an interesting year, since considering you bring it up. That was the year before the bubble burst, so there was an awful lot of just absolutely wasteful spending, and people making poor decisions, and then the investment community not really understanding the right questions to ask and so forth. So there was good money following bad, and it didn't work out so well in 2000s. But I think the industry got a lot smarter after that.
Agreed. And I think, it's interesting to look at when technologies come to criticality. So I think, maybe 10% of people regularly using email might be an example. And probably that is 95 to 99. And, 10% of internet users regularly going to websites, right? Maybe that's 2000 to 2005. Just throwing these out here. But thinking about the kind of platform nature of this, how it changes our professional and personal lives. And, AI for a long time was more of a statistical, algorithmic based system, and it wasn't as broadly applicable. Generative AI from 2015 on was really the kind of stage change for this technology. And so what I like to think about is, if we take 1999 to 2024, that 25 years and what happened, what does it look like for generative AI? Is it a 25-year ramp, or is it half of that time? And I often use the launch of ChatGPT as the point where you can say it's on the road to criticality. Wondering if you see any corollaries, or if you've got any thoughts there.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think you look at any of the tech adoption curves, they're just getting faster and shorter, and more steeply, up and to the right, as they say. So I think you're 100% right. I think with some of the bigger ones were no internet to internet, and people it's a whole new way of working, like a completely new way of working, a new lifestyle, and there was some speed bumps along the way, and a new and improved tech and so forth. So the fact that we've the average working person nowadays is almost all of them are digital native. They didn't really grow up in a world without some sort of a digital device. And I think one of the demarcation points was when the internet left, or the web, I suppose, left the office or the home. Mobile, making all that capability mobile in a smartphone was an absolute game changer. And I think that the adoption curve will be much, much faster with ChatGPT. And like every other piece of technology, it's got to work. It's got to work out a couple of bugs, but that'll happen without, in my mind, without question, over the next 12 to 18 months. And then usability, applicability will skyrocket.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think Vishnu's asking questions, providing use cases for AI. How do we improve trust? And I think those are all challenges. And what I've seen is if you can build systems where you provide feedback to the AI and you put up really high rails for essentially what the job description is, if you're talking about an AI agent, those are more extended use cases where you might put them in front of customers and partners. And in that case, it's a CSR or a workflow-based system. But there's so many more use cases, and I wonder what you think about what I see as the difference between maybe what's an enablement for a business and what is a transformation, right? So for the internet, a new business like social media or e-commerce is possible, but it wasn't before. But then go to 2010, 2015, now nearly every business must have at least a website, and most of their operations is either in the cloud or in a database that touches the internet. I wonder if you've got any thoughts on some of the real major points in insurance, or maybe some of the places you think generative AI is going to have a play there.
Well, I think before we get into real deep applicability and so forth, we got to solve some of the issues, some of the current shortcomings with AI, or at least question marks about AI. The idea regarding things like privacy, who's touching the data, how to get access to it, and what data are you yourself marrying up with the LLMs, because that's something that's becoming pretty popular. There's a recency bias, and then there's as everybody knows, the hallucination bias. The recency bias, I think, is people, the LLMs are boiling the internet to provide you something, and it's they're regurgitating back what you want to hear. So the probabilistic notion, and the data that they've got may be from and what they're working with maybe many years old, but it's going into the soup and then it's being pushed out to you in a probabilistic matter. And I think that they need to go, and some of them are going to more of a deterministic model where some firms are now saying, nope, we're going to put on rules and restrictions that say if we don't feel comfortable with that level of an answer, then we're going to come back with I don't know. And I think that level of credibility, which just spewing out something, and we've probably all seen it, where there are a lot of things that generative AI is really good at, and there's some things that it's just really not good at. So I think solving that, and then obviously the last one, probably the big one, is this whole hallucination thing, where it wants to provide you something, and ultimately it's close, but it's not right. But it's going to tell you, it's going to give you an answer. There was a study done not that long ago that said somebody in the business said, I think the hallucination rate was like 30%. And so if I was going to give any free advice on that, I would say take a piece of data that you have that's known, in a conventional way, and replicate that experiment in an AI world, and see what your rate of overlap is. One of my friends did that. She's a CMO in a consulting advisory firm, and they did it, and it's in the 85 to 90 range, and another CMO colleague of mine did it, and it was in like the 90 to 95 range. So, to get proof of concept, it's not a bad way to go about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's definitely hallucinations are a thing. I would say that they've been much more of a challenge, kind of, if you look every 6 months back for the last 2 years, there's been significant progress, and probably up to 95% is where we are for systems. Retrieval augmented generation is the proven way to take individualized data for a company or for some project and provide it to a large language model and have it use that. And so what we found is if you give a really strict job description to an AI agent and you give it specific data, you can be confident that it's going to use that data to answer a question 95% of the time accurately, and then it won't answer a question if it doesn't have that data. But there's still 5% variability, and it's still like a form of thinking that we don't know exactly how it works, which is an interesting and hard challenge to overcome. But what I'll say is, for me, the world changed when GPT-4 launched. So it wasn't actually that ChatGPT launched, which is coming up on 2 years at the end of this month.
Right.
ChatGPT launched with 3.5, and that was kind of like you know, a friend who's just graduated high school, thinks they know everything, and answers every question you ask, even though they don't know, right? And with GPT-4 passing many of the graduate level tests, it's more like a college or even a, you know, master's student graduate telling you things, and it's more often correct, although still it can be wrong. I think that it's interesting just in the, let's not talk about transformation, in the enablement sense of just helping as a copy editor, or to create images, or to help you with marketing materials, right? It's now becoming infused in nearly every really good software product that I interact with. And so I wonder if you're experiencing that too, or if you see any corollaries with the way software evolved on the internet age.
Oh no, I completely agree with that, and I think that I think every single industry is going to get enhanced and refined and improved, for that matter, by some form of AI. And so in the insurance space, you know, you talked about marketing at in that last couple of sentences. You know, it's a part of the whole insurance, you know, offering, but it's not core necessarily, like underwriting and claims. But it's an important part of it. And you know, so there's some companies out there, they've been working with and refining their AI capabilities for going on 8 years. And so, you know, I would encourage anybody in the insurance stack to look at, you know, where they can start testing and getting a proof of concept in as many areas as they feel comfortable. You know, particularly in the core elements of claims handling, and underwriting, because everybody, look, I think it's going to be I mean, it's a land grab and a foot race, and the people want to do it the old. I'll give you a couple examples in a second. Just like you know, just trying to dimensionalize the impact of this. People that do it the old school way. I mean, let's face it, not to beat up on our own industry, but there's still people out there working with faxes.
Yes.
And you know, it's just that's unheard of, but that's how they still do it. And healthcare, you know, I do a lot in healthcare, and same exact way. There's people that entire medical systems that they're still working off of a fax. And so those are going to get put out of business, left behind, unless they make some real material technological transformational changes. So in order of magnitude, you know, there's some companies that they will do research, and the way a company would do primary research in the old way, to do, like, you know, a segmentation analysis and persona development and so forth, is critical for our business and our industry. They would spend round numbers, $250,000, you know, 200 grand plus, and take roundabout 3 to 4 months to do that. That exact same process today can be done for about $3,000 in about 3 hours.
Right.
So, and if what you do in an AI world, you don't like the result, but you loaded all the data in and you've got all the questions, you can tweak that model and run it again.
That's right.
In the old way, the quote unquote running it again model is to replicate that entire process, cost and time, to quote unquote run it again. So, I mean, that's one very, very small use case of just the impact that this will have on our industry and our way of life.
Yeah, I agree. And I think nowadays you can also you can take your data and you can test it on a different large language model. And we're increasingly seeing more that are specialized. You know, maybe they're more strict around logic and rules and facts, or now they can create images or music or something else that isn't just language. And so that's going to keep kind of spreading out in terms of use cases. I wonder what you think will happen in the next 10 or so years with insurance. And I just want to, maybe you could start with your perspective on our own technology ramp. So I see insurance as being an early adopter to computing, let's say from the 50s to the 70s. And, you know, essentially the extension of life tables and other forms of risk modeling, computing, it worked really well. And then we get AS400 in the 80s, and sure, that's worthwhile. And as you say, we come to the culmination of phone, fax, and email at right around 2000. And I think that's where we stalled and we became much further behind the rest of the market. And I think the mobile revolution really left us behind because it actually reduced the level of interactivity we can do online. And with insurance, it's a really complex product. So that's my thought. I'm wondering if you've got any on that.
I wasn't in the business, back in those early years, of course, but I do fundamentally believe that the insurance business is still a people business. It's still a relationship business. Yep, we're going to get all kinds of technology coming at us. Can't stop that, and we shouldn't stop it. But at the end of the day, it is still a relationship business. Some products are bought, some products are sold, but at the end of the day, it's still a relationship business. I think that, and I actually would say, from my vantage point, I don't think that we were early adopters. You reference the 50s and 60s, and maybe so, but in modern times, I think insurance is one of the last remaining industries that transactional friction is really, really high, and using AI and other technology to help reduce or lower that transactional friction is really where a lot of value is currently locked up. That's one. Two, I think, hate to say it, but I do think that there are some companies on the carrier side in particular, or even, well, that's not true, even on the broker side, that that the belief is that touching every risk is where they add value.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get my hands in the file, let me look at it. I'm going to add my own interpretation and own thoughts and based on my own experience. That's unnecessary. So, machine underwriting, that's real. And you may miss a few things in there, but the amount of money you save by literally not having a human being touch it's the right thing to, in my mind. Again, I'm just saying my own personal feelings. It's the right thing to do. There's a lot of low level risks, and for a broker, I mean, I'm not sure what the real numbers are, but there's a lot of brokers where I heard feedback that, hey, if I touch this thing, 2 or 3 times, my margin is gone. If I have to return that phone call which is why small business insurance is so difficult. Nobody wanted to touch it because, oftentimes it was a little bit more bespoke than they wanted. Selling, home auto life is, a piece of cake in comparison to doing a bespoke small business insurance policy. So I think that if we can shift our mindset as an industry that says, I don't need to touch every single risk. Some of it can be straight through underwriting. Just make sure the underwriting is as tight as possible. Make sure the privacy is all there. AI-driven risk assessment and underwriting. I mean, that's there. There's plenty of companies out there that are offering that as a feature, right? Claims management, another area it's a big time suck. People have a lot of people in those departments that there's technology out there as well. Tractable and Shift technology and Snapsheet, other ones. There's lots of that kind of stuff. Customer service, and I could go on and on through like the different components of our industry, but there's just a lot of great tech happening out there. One that we haven't really talked about, privacy or fraud detection. So,
Yep.
Somebody can probably tell you the percentage of the amount of money that fraud costs the industry every year. But there's technology that's happening in AI-driven fraud detection tech that I think will help the industry as well. So lots happening, and what I encourage every company to do, whether it's insurance sector or others, is keep a learning curve as steep as you possibly can in AI. Paint the art of the possible and get a number of tests in the water, not just the bread and butter. So in the insurance industry, don't just test underwriting and claims. Go out and test something in finance, something in marketing, something in biz dev, et cetera, et cetera.
Those are golden words. And I just want to touch a few points that you made. So the first is human business. I totally agree with that. And the transactional friction as a key piece of essentially the industry that we have to fix that isn't working well now. And I do think that as generative AI progresses and as people start to trust knowledge bases and allow facts to be accessible to partners and customers, that at least information friction will change. And then over time, I think the product configuration and access will follow that too. So that's one place I'm excited. I like that you brought up fraud. I think that's actually an arms race challenge with generative AI now that you can generate videos and images and make a false claim with a false generated image. So I think that's going to be an interesting space. We're coming up on time. I do want to hit a couple of questions here. So Kirill, wondering what's the threshold for product and AI fidelity to make it commercially viable for established brands? And I'd say, at least for any internal use case, it's already very useful. And you could have a low bar like 80% accuracy, which is very low compared to where it actually is, and it still makes it worthwhile to provide all of the major documents in your company accessible via natural language to your team, for example. And then pushing out to your customers and partners, I think you've got to be much more specific. You've got to use tailored tools that can bring that accuracy up above 95%. And I think a human has to be in the loop. So there's always questions you want the human to build into. Ichan has got, the internet doesn't have the data challenges facing AI, quality, availability, privacy. Do you foresee those resolved quickly enough to allow AI adoption to take off? I do. I think already it's relatively expensive, but compared to standing up a full internal database in the last paradigm, this is cheaper. So you can stand up your own version of a large language model. Often that's a Meta Llama 3 model, and start to train that in your own environment. And I think we'll start to see this evolution in a similar way as we already deal with cloud, right? So you're already allowing Amazon Web Services, Google, Microsoft, and many of the businesses that they connect to access your data. And I think we'll get more and more comfortable with other systems like that are generative AI enabled. Anything from you, Russ?
I agree with all that. The one thing I would say, I guess one of my parting words would say, look, there's early days. This reminds me, I'm old enough to have experienced, like the dot bomb, late 90s of early internet stuff. There was a lot of snake oil then. There's a lot of snake oil now. Different form of technology, but there's a lot of,
Right.
some of it's duplicitous, and some of it is just they haven't figured out all the bells and whistles. So, there's still a lot of garbage out there. Buyer beware. Do your due diligence, but my free advice again is don't let that preclude you from starting. I think you really do need to start getting after it as soon as you possibly can.
I agree. And how do you find AI testing partners? I think that depends on the use case. Often, you can test a tool. My advice usually is don't spend too much on a tool until they've proven some value there. And just to end, I think, one of the big reasons we wanted to have this webinar is there's a lot of fear around this technology. And I totally agree with Russ. It's really about testing, experimenting, going across the value chain to see where there's value. And I do believe if you think about it like the internet, it's not going to take your job, but it's going to create a new economy, new ways to work with insurance. And so if we embrace that, we'll see a healthier economy that grows faster. So I'm excited about it.
I know we're getting up on time. My advice to anybody who's at the top of the food chain in your organizations, please do not do like a generative AI council where everything's got to come into a central hub. Like, democratize this. Get a functional head in the C-suite to nominate and run projects. Have a steerco if you want, but get them in the hands of people that are willing to embrace this and have a mechanism to report back. But don't try to centralize this. It'll stall.
Awesome. I think we can end there. Thanks, Russ.